And welcome. It is time for Constitution Radio. And glad you're here. If you are watching on Rumble or YouTube, either way, Douglas V. Gibbs is the keyword. Be sure to, if you're watching live, be sure to type something in the chat room. I appreciate you chatters, and also it's good for the algorithm to make sure other people find this show. Also, if you're watching later, let's kind of adjust things here now. If you're watching later, please comment in the comment. Same thing. I'd like to hear from you, and it helps with getting this show out there. Now, I normally have a collar and a button-down shirt, but I thought it would be appropriate to wear my Pro Football Hall of Fame shirt because today was the day that the 5 latest inductees were inducted into the Hall of Fame, and it was quite the ceremony. Yeah. So, and my wife and I sat and watched it together and enjoyed it. So that's the reason I'm in a t-shirt. It's got the Hall of Fame logo on it and all that. We were at the Hall of Fame last. She's pumping her fist. When was it? Last May of last year?
Was it last year?
Yeah, it was May of last year. May of 2025. We were out there. So, so if you missed it, Roger Craig, Drew Brees, Luke Kuechly, Adam Vinatieri, and Larry Fitzgerald, and all of them very deserving. In the case of Luke Kuechly, be honest with you, I didn't know a whole lot about him when he played because I don't pay attention to linebackers on teams I'm not a fan of typically. But he's the second youngest to be inducted at 35. Quite a career, quite the machine on defense. But anyway, I'm a huge football fan, baseball fan, and Constitution fan. And that last one is the reason why we are here. Welcome to Constitution Radio. I am a radio guy, so even though this is now on YouTube and Rumble, used to be on KMET 1490 AM and 98.1 FM, but now it's just here. But we still want to grow the show like it was on radio. Let's grow it again. So chat, hit subscribe or follow, leave comments. But the most important part, there's a button there somewhere on your screen for sharing. Get the link for this episode and share it with all your friends and family and your enemies. Oh, yeah. The people who hate the Constitution, they need to watch this the most. On the air with me are my good friends Dennis Jackson and Alan Myers. Typically how we run the show is I come up with the topic, I say something about it for a very long time, and then somehow they squeeze in a response. Good afternoon, Autumn Rain over at Rumble. Nice shirt. Football season finally back. Did you not? Glad I caught another live show. Real quick, Autumn Rain. Did you watch the Hall of Fame game? It's a here's the thing about preseason. Preseason doesn't count, but it counts for some of the guys playing because they're trying to make the team. And watching Carson Beck, draft pick for Arizona, and watching Haynes King, undrafted rookie who probably wouldn't even have a chance to make the team, but what the heck, they'll give him a chance. And the way they surrounded King after he made the game-winning touchdown and the way the team surrounded him, you would have thought he'd won the big game. It was an amazing thing to watch. It was probably the best preseason game I ever watched on Thursday. But anyway, I don't know if you got a chance to watch Autumn Rain or any of you out there. I enjoy football. I've always been a baseball first guy, but lately I've really gotten into football. And my Autumn Rain says it was so funny because people thought it was going to be a boring game, but it was really good. Yeah, it's the best preseason game I ever watched. My wife's on the edge of her seat cheering and stuff for both Carson Beck and Haynes King because she's like, they're both young guys trying to make the team, trying to do well. It was just fun watching these guys battle it out. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, but that's not why we're here today. We're here now. The first topic was inspired by Alan Myers. He says to me, Doug, we need to get into interpretation. Now, I know that your thoughts on how it should be talked about and mine are a little different, but I'll do the introduction. Then I'm going to go to you first because it was your idea. Usually I try to go to Dennis first because, Alan's trying to figure out, which cat he's going to allow to be on his lap, or is there only one? Maybe there's only one, but let's talk about interpretation. Now, when I hear the word interpretation, it's one of my least favorite words. When someone says, oh, well, they are broadly interpreting the Constitution, you might as well say to Alan that they are printing money out of thin air. No, I think it irks me more. I think that this idea of interpretation. So, well, Doug, what else are you supposed to do? You got to interpret it, and that's your interpretation. I hear that all the time. My interpretation is not my interpretation. I have studied the founding fathers to the point where my understanding is theirs. Now, when I talk about the founding fathers, I'm not saying that these guys were just a bunch of agreeable guys that agreed on everything and marched through the daisies together. There was debate. There was partisanship. There was a battle during the Constitutional Convention before and since. But generally, most of them agreed with how the Constitution is written. Now, we're going to get into something later where someone says, yeah, but Doug, that was a long time ago and the Constitution needs to be updated. Things have changed. And my response is usually the same. Liberty and tyranny don't change. The Constitution nailed it. But right now, in interpretation, that's the fundamental debate in constitutional history that sits at the heart of originalist thought. I'm an originalist. And we've seen this shift from textual application based on original intent to interpretive expansion fueling the departure from the framer's design. Alexander Hamilton, who, if you get to know me, you'll get to know that I am not a fan of Hamilton. His argument for implied powers in his 1791 opinion on the constitutionality of the national bank is the perfect starting point. He argued that while the Constitution doesn't explicitly grant Congress the power to create a bank, the necessary and proper clause implied such authority. Originalists counter this by pointing to James Madison's opposition and Jefferson's, but in this case, Madison, who argued that necessary meant strictly essential, not merely convenient or useful. Madison's view was that if the power wasn't explicitly enumerated, it didn't exist, a position that aligns with originalist perspective. John Marshall's 1803 decision in Marbury versus Madison then established judicial review. And I bet if I was to give a survey of the gentlemen on this show and most of the people in the chat room what they think of judicial review, it would probably get a down thumb. But most people out there, it's a part of the system. It's, well, how else are we supposed to figure out if a law is constitutional? We have bought into it. We have bought into the lie. And now understand, judicial review, this is the idea that gives the power to strike down laws to the judiciary. Originalists like myself don't necessarily reject judicial opinion entirely. They can have an opinion. If they think something's unconstitutional, have the opinion. Write it down, send it to Congress. But Marshall overstepped by making the judiciary supreme rather than a lesser branched tasked only with application of the law. Marshall's later decision in McCulloch versus Maryland, and this is something that would definitely get Warhamster going, in 1819, expanded Hamilton's implied powers doctrine further with his famous statement that we must never forget that it is the Constitution we are expounding. Originalist scholars like Robert Bork and the late Justice Antonin Scalia argued that this interpretive approach opened the door to judicial activism. Scalia often emphasized that the Constitution's meaning is fixed at the time of its ratification and should be applied, not adapted to modern preferences. The problem is that once we start interpreting rather than applying, we replace constitutional government with judicial government. The Constitution's structure, limited government, separation of powers, federalism, that has been eroded precisely through these expansive interpretations that found powers never intended by the framers. Those guilty of interpreting rather than applying the Constitution have even developed a specific method in how to interpret. And that is precisely the problem. It transforms constitutional application into a judicial philosophy exercise. The debate over interpretive methods has become a cornerstone of modern constitutional law. The primary competing methods are originalism. This is the method I support. It holds that the Constitution's meaning is fixed at the time of its ratification. The judge's job is to discover that original public meaning and apply it. As Justice Scalia put it, the Constitution is not a living document, but an enduring one. This method involves historical research into the text, the Federalist Papers, ratification debates, Madison's notes of the Philadelphia 1787 Convention, and the understanding of the words at the time they were written. Then there's the living constitutionalism method. This is the primary alternative. Proponents argue that the Constitution's principles are timeless, but their application must evolve with societal changes and modern values. They see interpretation as a dynamic process. This method allows judges to consider contemporary values, societal progress, and the consequences of their decisions. It's this approach that originalists see as a blank check for judges to impose their own policy preferences under the guise of interpretation. The existence of these formalized methods, is what has turned constitutional debate into a battle over judicial philosophy rather than a straightforward application of constitutional and legal text. When a judge says they are interpreting the Constitution, they are now often signaling which of these competing methods they subscribe to. This is why the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court justices have become so contentious. It's no longer just about the nominees' legal qualifications. It's a proxy war over which interpretive method will dominate the court for a generation. Senators on both sides grill nominees on whether they are originalists or believe in a living constitution, because they know that method dictates outcomes on everything from natural rights to social issues to federal power. This codification of interpretive methods is the institutionalization of the very problem Hamilton and Marshall started. It replaces the simple question, what does the law say, with the far more malleable question, what is the proper philosophical message to understand what the law should mean today? The framework effectively legitimizes the idea that the Constitution is a puzzle to be solved through a specific judicial technique rather than a clear set of rules to be followed. It's the ultimate justification for judges to become policymakers, which brings us to the latest anti-Constitution group of people, modern progressivism. The calls for court packing aren't a good faith response to judicial overreach. They're an admission that their preferred interpretive method, living constitutionalism, has lost its institutional foothold on the Supreme Court. The hypocrisy is glaring. For decades, progressives championed an evolving constitution when the court, led by figures like Earl Warren and later William Brennan, was discovering new rights and expanding federal power in ways that aligned with their agenda. The judiciary was their preferred vehicle for social change when they couldn't win through the legislative process. And now that the court has a majority that applies textual and historical constraints, the institution itself is suddenly illegitimate and undemocratic. This reveals their true position. They don't believe in a separation of powers or that the judiciary was designed to be the weakest branch of government. They believe in a judiciary that serves their policy goals and must rule over the other branches of government. When the court was a policy-making engine for the left, it was a vital safeguard and the final arbiter of the Constitution. Now that it's reverting to its constitutional role, it's an obstacle to be dismantled. The threats to blow up the system are the ultimate tale. The Constitution establishes a specific process for amending its structure or changing the number of justices. But that process is difficult by design, requiring broad consensus across states and political factions. Instead of engaging in that hard work of building genuine consensus, they propose extra constitutional shortcuts like court packing. It's the constitutional equivalent of taking your ball and going home when you're losing the game. And this behavior fundamentally undermines the rule of law itself. The rule of law, from an originalist perspective, means we are all governed by fixed, neutral principles applied equally, not by the whims of a temporary political majority. When one side signals that only one legitimate court is one that rules in their favor, they're replacing rule of law with the rule of political preference. They're essentially arguing that the system's legitimacy is conditional on it producing their desired outcomes. It's a transactional view of our founding institutions that is profoundly dangerous. If the number of justices can be expanded anytime the court issues an unpopular ruling, then the court ceases to be a body of law and becomes another political prize to be won. It's justice for sale to the highest bidder in the next election cycle. The American constitutional system is not an accident, but a product of deliberate design based on centuries of political philosophy and hard-won experience. Its success is empirical proof of its genius. The core of the Constitution's structure, limited government, separation of powers, federalism, and individual natural rights, is the engine of American prosperity and freedom. When we adhere to it, we thrive. When we drift into interpretation and judicial invention, we create instability, erode public trust, and open the door to the kind of power grabs we're seeing. Preaching this message means reframing the entire debate. It's not about being stuck in the past, but about preserving the proven mechanism for a free and stable society. It's arguing that the founders weren't just wealthy white men from the 18th century. They were political architects who designed a system superior to any that had come before, precisely because it was designed to constrain human nature's lust for power, not unleash it. This approach directly counters the progressive narrative. While they see the Constitution as a flawed document that needs to be fixed by modern sensibilities, the originalist argument is that its perceived flaws are often features, not bugs. The difficulty of amendment, the gridlock of separated powers, the emphasis on enumerated powers rather than what the government must do for you. These are the very safeguards that prevent tyranny. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. The United States, operating under this constitutional framework, became the wealthiest, most powerful, and most free nation in human history. It attracted immigrants from every corner of the globe and defeated totalitarian ideologies. That track record is the originalist's strongest evidence. The argument becomes, why would we abandon the footprint for the most successful Republican experiment in history in favor of the unproven, ever-shifting theories of modern academics and activists? Ultimately, doubling down on constitutionalism is a call for intellectual and moral clarity. It's an assertion that there is such a thing as truth in governance, that the principles of liberty are timeless, and that our duty is not to reinvent the wheel every generation, but to maintain the magnificent machinery we were given. It's the ultimate argument against blow up the system mentality. You don't destroy the most successful system in history because you're not getting your way. You recommit to the principles that made it successful in the first place. And as expected, Warhamster is joining us. But before we get to Warhamster, and I appreciate you being here, Warhamster, I want to get Alan and Dennis and their takes first, and then you're going to be the cleanup hitter. So, Alan, sir.
Hello.
What are your thoughts about what I just went? It was your idea to talk about interpretation. That's my response to your idea.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah. Let me help you.
You're echoing.
Let me unplug my.
I hear him typing. I hear him doing something. Or maybe that's Warhamster typing. All right. So while I'm waiting for Alan to come back, Warhamster, you get to step in as pinch hitter. Go ahead.
You gonna pull me on screen, or there we go.
Yep, I already did.
Oh, you're a step ahead of me. There's a slight delay. What specifically would you love me to address, Mr. Gibbs?
Well, I addressed a lot of things, and I figured, well, let me start with this. I said to the audience early on that when I hear someone say broadly interpret, that's worse than someone saying to Alan that they're printing money out of thin air. This idea of interpretation, and I can't count how many times people say, well, Doug, I listened to you in your class, so well, that's your interpretation. I don't interpret, man. You know me well enough. What's coming out of my mouth is what was decided upon, what was argued, what was debated. I don't believe in interpretation. I believe that the Constitution was written in a manner that the average citizen at the time could read and understand fully what it meant. And then along comes Alexander Hamilton. Oh, wait a second. There's implied powers in there. And it just began a cycle that we are now really suffering the consequences of. We have become Hamilton's and Marshall's America. And it's because of interpretation and judicial review. Go ahead, sir.
It's what I call the slippery slope. Either you have limited government or you do not. And once you say, okay, we got limited government, but those buts keep coming, and you end up with, a situation where you become tax slaves, where you're paying 50% of your, of what you make every year unconstitutionally to pay for a bunch of welfare programs that the founding fathers would have turned over in their grave if they knew we were going to do all these things. That was not what the federal government was going to do. They discussed these type of things in Philadelphia, and they shot them down.
Right.
And they sent them out to the states and said, look, this is what we're going to do for this new central government. This is all we're going to do. And they ratified it. Everyone said, okay, we're willing to give a little bit more power to the central government, but as long as it's limited to these enumerated powers. And as you said, Hamilton comes in there and says, yeah, but, and starts making exceptions. And that's where the slippery slope starts, because you have now given an incentive to moneyed interests and other special interests to put politicians in office that are going to send tax dollars their direction. And those tax dollars have to come from somewhere. And that means you and me, and are going to have to somehow pay for other people's desires and greed. And that's why the slippery slope's got to stop on day one. There are no implied powers. They were enumerated. And it's one of the things I started saying when I met youth several years ago, make the enumeration doctrine great again. MEDGA, that's what we should be doing. I mean, if we had to, I get asked this all the time, if you had to rewrite the Constitution so that it couldn't be misinterpreted, I would have made sure that the enumeration doctrine was actually enumerated. These are the government's powers, no more. There would have been no need for a Bill of Rights, even though the Bill of Rights, 9th and 10th Amendment, are basically the enumeration doctrine. But we've chosen to ignore that, and that's really how we got where we are today. And it didn't happen overnight. It was incrementally.
Absolutely. And I want to real quick say hello in the chat room to some of the folks that are chatting. If you're watching live, please join the chat room for two reasons. No, one, it's good for the algorithm, and two, well, you get to meet some people, you get a chance to talk. So in the Rumble chat room, we have Autumn Rain, we have Dobie Dave, we have Warhamster, and then in the YouTube chat room, I have Silvermine. And come on, YouTubers, get in there. I've noticed, it's funny because I have over 1,000 subscribers, 1,500 or something like that at YouTube, and we get a very small crowd. And then we get over to Rumble. I have like 300 subscribers, something like that right now, and it's the big crowd. Come on, YouTube, are you going to let Rumble outdo you guys? Really? Come on, man, get in there. But and it's the big crowd. Come on. All right, now I'm hearing me talk. Is that you, Alan, or is that you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
But you're still echoing.
Let me go out and come back out.
All right. He's going to leave and come back. Meanwhile, Dennis, now you get to step up. I'm hearing me echo again. I don't hear when you were going, Warhamster. But let's just as a test. I'm going to mute your Warhamster and see if I hear the echo. So, hello. Yep. I heard the echo. So I'm getting it from you as well, more hamster for some reason.
Doug, that's probably going to be an issue on your end if you're hearing it from more than one speaker.
But I'm not getting it from Dennis.
I haven't said much yet.
Oh, yes, I am. Okay,
So
then maybe it's my problem.
Yeah, it's on your end. If it comes from more than one input, it's going to be on your end. Because I'm not getting echo here, and I don't. Dennis, are you getting echo at all?
No, I hear everything fine.
Yep. So it's a Doug problem. No,
Okay.
I can't say it's boomer tech on his end because he's not quite a boomer, but.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
I am.
Well, we can make fun of you, Dennis, for boomer tech.
All right, Alan.
I'm here.
Okay, see, I'm not getting echo from him anymore. But I'm getting it from me now. That's weird. All right. Well, anyway, go ahead, Alan, and I will just listen.
I hear you echo.
Okay, I'll see what I can do while you talk. Go ahead.
Okay. Good day, everyone. Brady, good to see you. Dennis, glad you're here. My thoughts on this is that we can use many different terms for the Constitution. Contract, compact, written agreement, either way. It's a contract. And the people who took over 4 months to write it and argued about it and discussed and debated and prayed about it, they were very specific in what they wrote. And to me, it's as a contract, you read it, you understand it, you follow it. There's nothing in the Constitution, as far as I read, and I'm waiting for Doug to come back because he can answer it.
Go ahead.
That where in the Constitution, specifically Article 3, did the judicial branch, was it, because it had nothing until it was written in the Constitution and ratified, where in that article or anywhere else in the Constitution did the judicial branch be given the power for judicial review?
It isn't.
Thank you.
Not only that, Alan, it was actually debated in Philadelphia. We haven't quite gotten to there on our Wednesday series, but judicial review was proposed in Philadelphia and resoundingly shot down. and Marshall knew it.
Oh yeah, and to that point, to me is what is written in the 10th Amendment, and it's very specific. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. To me, this is the 10th Amendment tells us that whatever power the United States, this new federal government, has, it had to be given to it by the Constitution. That's it. Then how the court is willing to overlook things. You all know this case very well. It comes to my mind, Marbury versus Madison. And Marbury was somebody who was supposed to become, he was either a justice of the peace or some judge level position. But to get that, he had to get his papers. And this was John Adams' big court cramming at the end of his term, which was after he kind of went rogue, especially with the Alien and Sedition Act. Marbury didn't get his papers. He sued. This eventually wound up at the Supreme Court. Madison is James Madison, aka Mr. Constitution. This goes to the court. The court decides in the favor of Marbury, but it does acknowledge one thing: the court has no power of enforcement. What makes this case so bad is that the I think the Chief Justice was John Marshall. But before John Marshall was appointed Supreme Court Justice, he was the Secretary of State for John Adams. He was the guy that did not get the paperwork to Marbury, which means this is an absolute clear conflict of interest. And no one calls him on it. It's an absolutely horrible decision. He never should have been involved. The other thing is that, and Doug and Brady, you guys know this very well, and you can see the discussions in the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers. And also keeping in mind, what were the founders, what did they recently experience? They experienced the Revolutionary War against Britain. They experienced the tyranny of Britain when they were colony status. They were absolutely fearful of a too powerful government. And the Anti-Federalists, well, the Federalists said, and I believe you guys know this better than me, I think it's in Federalist Paper 45, look, at this is all we're giving them, meaning the federal government. And the Anti-Federalists saying that's too much. Either way, we have a constitution. Now, one thing I looked up while you were all talking is this is a definition of interpretation. The act of explaining, making sense of, or figuring out what something means. Okay, that is much different than broadly interpreting, which is make it say what you want it to say. If you're in the federal government and you have to take the oath to protect and defend the Constitution, that means you read it the way it was written. There is so much access to information about what was said at the time, what was thought, what was known, what was feared. It's not that hard to understand what was meant when the Constitution was written, which means what was meant when it was written is what it means today. A couple other things. The founders were not locked into this is it, you can never do anything else. They gave the future the ability to amend, and the amendment process was begun within 2 years, or it was finalized in 2 years with the first 10 amendments. But to get an amendment finally ratified, you need 3/4 of the states. They chose that high mark, I believe, because they did not want, the founders, did not want the Constitution changed willy-nilly. It had to be for a solid reason, and you had to have a vast majority of people agreeing with it. If you can change it at will, then why did they even have the amendment process? If you can read into the document whatever you want, you don't need the amendment process. You just broadly interpret. They're not the people who want to, and I know we talk about it, whether it's living or breathing. Well, it's alive, but living and breathing doesn't mean you make it say whatever you want it to say. And we need to read it, we need to understand it, we need to follow it. And if we think something needs to be changed, fine, go through the amendment process. And some people will complain that, well, the amendment process takes too much time and it's too hard to do. Well, that was the purpose. That was the purpose. And the things that needed to be done have been done. But to me, the biggest problem we face is not that the Constitution was so poorly written. It's that it's not being properly executed. And if you want to know how badly the federal government is doing, and I looked it up when we went on air, the federal government, I won't call it national, I'll call it the federal government debt, is now over $39 $39.8 trillion.
Is that a lot?
Well, I'm going to ask you, Grady. Okay, 39.8 is trillion is 39.8 and then 11 more zeros. But most people, including me, can't really process that number just on its own. I'm going to go down to 1 trillion. And I know that 1 trillion is equal to 1,000 billion. It's just a huge number to me. I can't really process it. I did the calculations. Thank you for asking. And I decided to calculate 1 trillion in what I call something understandable units, seconds, inches, and miles. If a person was to wish to live 1 trillion seconds, they would live to be 31,709 years old. Don't think that's going to happen.
Can I sign up for that plan?
Yeah, I'll get to the paperwork after the show. The next trillion is inches. Now, we all can process an inch. Get a ruler, take a look. If you had a goal of walking 1 trillion inches in your lifetime, you would walk a distance equal to 633 times around the Earth at the equator. That's not going to happen. Remember, this is 1 trillion. And finally, you have a goal of becoming the first person in your neighborhood with the 1 trillion mile frequent flyer card. Great. All you have to do is fly a distance equal to 107 round trips from Earth to Pluto and back. That's 1 trillion. The debt is now over 39.8. And under the current monetary system, it will become unserviceable. But the one thing I'm very clear on, given I know what a Ponzi scheme is, which is the borrower does not have a for-profit business with which to repay the debt. Well, that's the federal government. Our federal government is running the world's largest Ponzi scheme. We need to get back. We need to get involved. And we need to get the people that we send to DC, as Doug would say, to not be cockroaches. And this is on us. And if you think this is tough, I'll tell you what's tough from my looking back in history. It's late 1775. It's early 1776. The American Revolution has already begun with Lexington and Concord. And you're about to travel to Philadelphia to meet up with a bunch of people and officially tell Britain, we're done with you. Knowing that if you put your name on that document, you're signing your death warrant. Because if you're found, you will be hung. They didn't do any of this willy-nilly or just cause. And it's time that, to take the spirit and understand what we've been given. And the Constitution is not to be broadly interpreted from my perspective. It's to be read, it's to be understood, and it's to be followed. And if it needs to be changed, which they knew it would be, then we have to work at amending it. How's that, Doug?
Doug, you've muted yourself. We can't hear you. I'll answer, Alan. That's outstanding until Doug figures out that
Send him a text that says you're muted.
He heard me. He can hear us.
Okay. Well, you're muted, Dougie. And he doesn't know why.
Well, let's take over a show, Alan.
I think we should.
It'll be like one of those teen takeovers. A couple of youngins like you and I.
That's okay, right? Oh, wait a minute. The founders took over the country and told Britain to go.
Well, we can't do that without Dennis. Let's have Dennis jump in and respond
to
what you said.
You want me to say something about the interpretations?
Yeah, sure. While we're waiting for Doug to figure out how to hit unmute.
Well, the thought that came to my mind when the discussion was going on about it needs to be updated, needs to be applied. Was okay. Let's go back to Mount Sinai and Moses and the Ten Commandments.
Hey, Dennis, let me let me interrupt for a minute. I want to hear what you're saying, but you're well. Now I hear that my voice twice.
Well, let
Yeah,
Dennis
I
go.
haven't done anything.
Okay.
Dennis sounds good on my end. So let it.
Okay. Let it go.
I'm just trying to ignore it and keep talking like I don't hear it. You got Ten Commandments. You got the first four about God. Number 5 is about honoring your father and mother. You know, the last 5 are about dealing with other people. So the first of the second 5, which is number 6, is how about if we don't murder anybody? That sounds pretty commonsensical to me. The second one, which is number 7, after murder, is adultery. And then you got the other ones, don't lie, don't steal, don't covet. And they all make sense, and it all protects relationships. But if after the Ten Commandments were given, you go a generation or two, and now all the young ones are growing up, and they don't know about this moral code, whether it be adultery or fornication. I mean, basically the law of chastity was the rule. If you weren't married, you didn't have sex. That was it. And if you were homosexual, you had another real problem. But, if the rising generation were to say, we need to update the Ten Commandments and get rid of the adultery, well, then they've changed the whole morality of the country. And what they've done is they've changed what God gave them. And so when we start interpreting the Constitution, and I believe the Constitution is an inspired document. I believe God was involved in the founding of this nation, in preserving it, delivering it out of King George's hands, and inspiring the men that were the best men he had available to write the Constitution, and ordained it as, I call it, American scripture. And now you got guys a generation, a century, 2 centuries later that want to go in and rewrite. And the scriptures tell you, that the scripture is not of any private interpretation. The people who wrote it were inspired by the Holy Ghost. And when you read it by the power of the Holy Ghost, you'll get the right reading. So if you read the Constitution by the spirit of the Constitution, the originalist viewpoint, then we'll all be fine. But, people want to do it their way, and they want to change it. And, Warhamster mentioned, it's a slippery slope. Yeah, it definitely is. I remember with gay rights, back, 40, 50 years ago, they just said, hey, we just want a civil union. We don't want to be married. We just want to have the ability to have spousal rights and so forth, like a family. So we'll call it a civil union. Well, it didn't last very long. They got that, and then they kept going, and, they just keep going and going and going to where now, you got rights for trans and rights for anything, anywhere, and the Democratic Party embraces that, and they're rewriting all of the American culture. Our grandfathers would sit here, and grandmothers, and say, what is going on in society? And I'm not a prude, but I'm just simply saying that the moral bar, we're playing limbo with the moral bar. How low can you go? And when it gets too low, society does fight back, just as Doug was saying that, if the government gets involved in too many things, people will go back in and try to wrestle it away and get back to, the Supreme Court now compared to what it was under Earl Warren and others. So, yeah, this interpretation game, I find it interesting because I believe my opinions are right. Okay. Most people do. But I allow everybody else their own opinion. And as others have said, I'm willing to die for your opinion, even though I don't believe in it, because I'm willing to protect your right. Well, the people that generally disagree with me won't say that to me. They want to silence me. And that's what we have today. The opposition party today is lying. They are circumventing. They are changing the definition of words and language. They're watering everything that shows accountability and responsibility They're watering it down. They're giving away money, call it rights if you want. They're buying votes by their legislation and the kickbacks they give. I look at the what's going on in the car industry with the problems they're having with the electric cars, and California and the federal government, they wanted the electric cars because they were anti gasoline, and so they gave tax rebates. My ex-wife was looking at getting one. And it was a $21,000 car, but it was a $7,000 tax rebate. It was only going to be 14 grand. She didn't buy it. But the thought that 1/3 of that car was being paid for by guys like me or whoever else, and if they made the electric guys, if they didn't give them the rebate, they wouldn't be able to compete back then because the price was too high. And people would just say, no, I can't afford that for the car. I'll just go ahead and get, the gas car. And when they get more efficient and the batteries aren't that expensive and they're competitive, then we'll buy them. But nobody wanted to wait, so they started subsidizing. So, we can talk about Hamilton. We can talk, about Marshall and, the dirt they pulled and the problems they started. But any generation, as they come up, there are those that will stand by the law and those that will only stand for themselves. And regrettably, society is such to where people are more willing to get something for nothing than work for it. And when you get the majority that can figure out they can vote themselves money out of the public treasury, you wind up with a $39.8 trillion debt, and they just keep kicking the can down the road. So, but Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. Alan knows no serious presidential candidate has a major platform thing on reducing the national debt because nobody wants to hear about it. They want the next generation to fix the problem. So, wrestling with the Constitution, original intent, that'll go on forever. And I appreciate you guys and, your thoughts and your talents and the effort you make. And I hope, we can be effective in this because the more we get off course, the tougher it is to, get back online. It takes you longer. You got more distance, more hill to climb, and less time to do it. It's just, it's not good.
Kind of in response to what you're saying, I'm hoping I sound okay now. I actually reset everything. I rebooted and everything.
Yeah, everything's fine. No echo.
Yeah.
You sound good to me, Doug.
All right, very good. That's the way it started as. But anyway, and you're talking about the reduction of debt and all of that, and it's interesting because if you listen to them, basically, when I say them, I mean those who oppose common sense, Constitution, liberty, free market, and all of the other things that we find dear to us. If you listen to them, government is the answer. Therefore, the way to fix anything is more money from the government. It's the reason why Doge and the fraud and waste, it's like, well, it's fraudulent money. Yeah, but it's less money going to that. So you're taking, away something from somebody. No, it has nothing to do with how much, and everything. It has everything to do with the quality or where it's going or the constitutionality or whatever. And of course, also a lot of the reasons why some of these people get angry when the spending goes down is because they're pulling from it. They are padding their pockets with that, and that's part of the reason as well. Very good discussion, gentlemen. I'm going to shift gears to Iran, and what I'm going to say, I could never say on a network. I could never say if I was a hired talk show host. But because I pay my own way, it's my own, and I may even get canceled by one particular channel here that carries this because of what I'm getting ready to say. The other one won't, Rumble won't. But I want us to understand something about Iran. And the problem is, like with everything, it becomes a binary conversation. So President Trump has announced once again that Iran wants to make a deal. And I believe that they told him that. But they're lying. They don't want to make a deal. They never want to make a deal. They should want to make a deal. He believes them because they should want to make a deal. But Islam sees everything as a temporary move so that it can reposition and reorientate itself for the ultimate goal, worldwide domination by Islam and the death of all infidels, particularly America and Israel. Currently, during this current war, the Iranian economy is in shambles. Ordinary residents in the country, we're seeing in news reports that they are stealing basic groceries from supermarket shelves to survive. The Islamic Republic's economy is nearing complete collapse. And as the people starve and die, a quote comes to mind. Now, understand this quote by Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir. When she says Arabs, what she meant was Muslims. But at the time, Iran wasn't necessarily a part of that yet, completely. It was still working on it. And so when she says Arabs, what she means is Islam, Muslims. But here's what she said. Peace will come when the Arabs love their children more than they hate us. And then she followed that quote up with another one. When peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. The problem is, when it comes to Islam, Golda Meir's plea is impossible. Islam is incapable of caring about their own children. They send their children out to be warriors against the infidel. They send their children out wearing suicide bomb vests. And they carry no mercy for anyone who is an infidel. It is all about their perception of the barbaric and murderous will of Allah. Because of that belief system, they are willing to kill their own people in the communities in Iran rather than truly make a deal with the United States. And that is why Iran must never possess a nuclear weapon. That is why it was reasonable for President Trump to begin his campaign. Because if ever Iran possessed a nuclear warhead and the ability to deploy them, then they would be willing to annihilate Israel, Europe, America, and even their own people if they believed it was what Allah wanted for the furtherance of Islam. So their own people steal to eat, and the leadership continues to allow the economy to deteriorate as they delay and stall with President Trump. And it's because they believe they have the upper hand, because they have something they don't believe anybody else has. Time. They've been patient for hundreds of years, thousands of years. Well, hundreds of years. They are willing to allow millions of their people die because they are convinced that the United States will either back down under tremendous pressure from the world, back down under tremendous pressure from the progressive left, or eventually they'll just outweight Trump, and because in 2 years he'll no longer be president. Perhaps in a few months he'll no longer have support of Congress, or if it takes longer, so be it. But they know that they can wait. Eventually, someone who falls for their garbage will be in control, and then they can go back to the same old, same old. Deals are temporary, and the furtherance of Islam is a game of patience and time that they are willing to utilize. And official statistics paint a grim picture of hyperinflation eroding purchasing power in Iran. While food inflation is in the triple digits, oils and fats have exceeded 270% inflation during some periods during this conflict. The response by the leadership is that the enemy is exerting pressure in an attempt to provoke the people into protesting. Therefore, remain powerful and respected by sticking it out. In a sense, the message is die of starvation, for Allah commands it, rather than make any sincere deal with America. And if the people die, so be it. They would rather be completely destroyed than to step away from Iran's Islamic revolutionary aims. And I'm talking about the leadership here. And they believe they cannot be destroyed anyway. Allah will either save them or allow them to die to further their Islamic cause, and either is acceptable to them. Now, I hope, I truly do, that the people in the streets are safe, secure, have a good life ahead of them, that they'll rise up and rid themselves of this regime in Iran. But the reality is, due to the fear held by the people and the brainwashing of Islam. Desperation alone will not yield political change. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Basij forces are ready and still able to suppress any unrest. President Trump said in a recent interview they want to make a deal. Look, it's obvious. They don't want to be hit, okay? They want to make a deal. So we will see. The president would be absolutely correct when talking about sane, reasonable, and common sense populations. But Iran's leadership is none of those things. And I'm not saying that hitting Iran was a mistake. It had to be done because of the reasons I have presented. We must never allow them to have nuclear weapons. The Strait of Hormuz is a minor part of it in the broad scheme of things. The hardcore leadership of Iran believes in the 12th Imam and an apocalyptic prophetic vision of the future that goes along with that belief. They don't care about mutually assured destruction or whether or not their citizens suffer or die. Chaos is the goal. Death is the aim. And from it, they believe, through all of the madness and fire, a new worldwide caliphate will arise. You cannot honestly negotiate with them. They have no mercy. They have no reasonable view of the world or their future. The only thing they understand is being beaten into submission, and then maybe there will be a deal of some kind when they will break and deny the moment they think they have the will of Allah on their side. Once again, Islam is in it for the long game. And for them, what is going on in Iran is a minor part of the war anyway. Iran is a small piece of it. It's just one battlefield in a much larger war. And they're willing to lose that battlefield. They can lose it. They will throw it away if they have to. Their war is worldwide, and it always has been. Their aim is world domination. And despite the kinetic warfare that is in their face in Iran, they have their own forces marching across America right now. Their war against the infidel has their armies infiltrating each country. Spain, France, Britain, the rest of Europe, Asia, creating inside the borders of their enemy Muslim neighborhoods, Muslim influence in the media, Muslim influence in the culture, and the placement of Islamic politicians like Abdul el-Sayed in Michigan inside the very political systems of their enemies. He says he's a socialist. He says he's a doctor. He says he's a part of a new force rising in the Democratic Party. But in the end, he too is simply a part of the war. He is a Muslim who hates Israel, hates Jews, hates America, and he is poised to be a part of the giant Islamic attack against America from within. And like the leadership in Iran, el-Sayed's concern is not his own opportunities as an individual or the welfare of anyone he might represent. His aim is only one thing: the furtherance of Islam. He will lie, he will curse, he will claim he has your best interest at heart. He is a part of Islam's bizarre partnership with the Democratic Socialists because they both have a few things in common. They hate America. They hate Jews. They hate Israel. They hate Christians. They hate individualism. And while the two ideologies are deep down incompatible, their focus is not on if they can get along. Their focus is on destroying the enemies of their ideologies who stand in their way. Abdul el-Sayed, on the ballot in November for United States Senator from Michigan, is only the latest turn in this war. They've already placed many more boots on the ground. Over 100 Muslims reside in political seats around the country. Some you've heard of: Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Each of them are not just Muslim, they are ready to take their Islamic war to the full length of the field. They are willing, able, and enthusiastic contributors in a battle to normalize their anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Jewish, and anti-Christian platform. They are using democracy to force into place what would seem unimaginable before and shortly after 9/11. Now, in today's America, we have Hamas-loving mobs marching through New York City, screaming for the murder of Jews. Just imagine how New Yorkers would have reacted to this madness on September 12th, 2001. We were told to never forget, and now the mayor of New York City is an outspoken socialist Muslim who defended an Al-Qaeda terrorist to serve as the city's chief counsel. Islam, after they attacked us, and I'm not going to get into all the theories about that, Islam was a component. Islam, after they attacked us, played the victim, and we fell for it. And as Ronald Reagan famously said, freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. And those in world history who have known freedom and then lost it have never known it again. So we are continuing to launch devastating bombing campaigns on Iran. Donald J. Trump did not want any forever wars, not realizing that we were already locked in one. Iran is not the first chapter. It's the latest chapter. The Iraq War, Afghanistan, the Persian Gulf War, the Lebanon crisis, the Barbary Wars, the Crusades. The forever war has always been there. And Islam will not stop until they are utterly rendered incapable of continuing, or as Golda Meir proclaimed, they begin to love their children more than they hate us. By haggling, Iran's Islamic leadership shows us that they believe all they need to do is run out the clock. And they are banking on a Democratic win in the midterms to shorten that wait. We have said all along we do not want boots on the ground. And so far, the bombing has not descended into a ground war. We don't truly know the true extent of the damage of the Iranian regime and its military-industrial nuclear complex because there's no embedded reporters or Western journalists in Iran. We don't truly know the mood of the people of Iran, and if they have enough resolve to eventually protest again or overthrow the regime. We don't know if there will be any future assistance from other countries to keep this regime from rising up again and obtaining nuclear weapons. All we know is that the tensions are increasing as Iran runs out of money and basic goods. All we know is that if this ends, it is getting to the point that it will take decades for Iran to rebuild, and they will be at a disadvantage when dealing with their neighbors who they so gratuitously attacked. The regime has no money, no effective combat or air defenses, no allies, except inside the deepest hearts of Muslims who agree that someday they will finally defeat the West and launch a worldwide caliphate that will bring peace into the world. Well, until they, of course, go back to fighting each other, as they have throughout the history of Islam. And as long as the Trump administration is in place and his opponents are on defense, Iran and Islam will only be able to wage war on minor battlefields. Once the Democrats, if the Democrats, regain power, the entire world will once again be Islam's battlefield, and this time they will go for broke. Dennis, why don't you start it off this time?
Well, I always kind of have a logical problem with Islam, and you caught yourself when you were talking about Islam and they've been around for hundreds and thousands. Oh, nope, no, not thousands of years. So let me get this straight. Somebody created the earth and created life on earth. I assume that Muslims say that was Allah. Don't know.
Right.
But
from their point of view, it's been
Allah,
thousands of years.
Allah never made himself known until what, the 600 AD?
Right. 700,
Okay.
Just before 700 AD, yeah.
All right, so this God created this earth and put people on it if you just go, the Adam and Eve typical type thing, Moses, 1500 BC, you can go back as far as you can in recorded history, and you've got thousands of years before Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever that number is, and I don't want to debate it. If it's 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is, it is. But sometime, centuries in the AD deal, you got Muhammad, who all of a sudden, he's the guy that talks to Allah and starts the true religion of Allah. So why did God, Allah, create Earth, have millions and millions or billions or however many live on that planet for millennia, however many thousands of years, and not have the truth revealed to him? I mean, he didn't care about those people he created. Were they kind of, like lab rats? I mean, what was his opinion of them? And then Muhammad has this vision and he creates this new religion. And now God has finally spoken. And logically, nobody would believe that. I don't care who I talk to. Why would God wait that long and let that many of his children, his creations, his robots, however you want to term the relationship between God and humans, is it creator, inventor? Is it father, son? What is it? Who knows? But whatever that relationship is, Allah didn't care about all of those until Muhammad happened to come by. And now what? All of those that are coming down to earth now, most of which still are not Muslims, a growing percent, it's about maybe a third of the planet now, he's going to tell his followers to rape and murder and kill and destroy all the people that aren't in his religion, even though he waited thousands of years before he started his religion. And now he wants to make a caliphate and wipe out everybody else. So what was the purpose of God to create all these other infidels just to get them killed? There's no logic to that doctrine.
In the shortest sentence, the Creator is calling for destruction.
Well, yeah, but the Creator is saying, I created Adam and Eve, I created the Egyptians, I created, the Assyrians, I created Babylon, I created Jerusalem, I created Africa, I created all these things. I was just on dope. I was just doing it. I don't care what happens to them. And then I finally woke up one morning and I looked at my wife, if he has a wife, or maybe he's gay. I don't know. Who knows what God is anymore, right?
Puerto Rico out there in Texas.
So you got him to say, okay, Muhammad's the man. I'm going to give him the doctrine. And, if you want to screw 9-year-olds, that's okay. If you want to behead people after they've surrendered and they're willing to pay jizya, but, you don't want to take their money, but you want to kill them, go ahead and kill them. You can go through the trains of the UK or in France and just pull out a knife and start stabbing people, as long as you're saying Allah Akbar as you do it, you're okay. What kind of God is that? That isn't a God.
Let me stop you there for a second, because there's a fascinating study that I did. So if you go through the Quran and you break down the attributes of Allah, and then you go through the Bible and you break down the attributes of God, they are the exact opposite of each other.
Well, that's what happens when you got the devil fighting the man,
There you go. I think you might have touched on something there.
Well, so like I say, I respect everybody. They can believe what they want. I have my unique, religious views, which I believe are correct. But, that's fine. But I'll allow you your beliefs, and I'll allow somebody else's belief. And if they want to go out and raise pink flowers that they can put into paste, to feed their children, because that's going to make them smarter, if that's how they want to raise their family, if it's not against the law, I guess they can do it. I really don't care. You want to be a hippie, be a hippie. You want to do drugs, I can kind of get into that one with you between legal, illegal, and all of that.
Yeah,
but,
you and I
you
might
know,
go toe to toe, but anyway, go ahead.
But I'm just simply saying that, what kind of a God is that? That isn't a God. He didn't exist until 700 AD. What was he doing? John dope? What's he doing all that time?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get a different...
So I don't know. I have no real patience for people that can try to argue that point. And as you're talking about the guy El Sad or whatever, that he doesn't care about his life or anybody else's life. It's all for the party. I mean that.
All for Islam. All for the
furtherance
of Islam. Yeah.
The less importance you put on life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the less you do that, the less godly you are. And when they go to hold the mirror up to take a look at themselves, they are not going to see a reflection. Because that's how ungodly they are. Vampires, all that good stuff. You can't see them in a mirror. So anyway, I think the U.S. has gone far, far, far too long. They need to take a look at the thing from the Holy Land. I can't remember the name of the report, but it's the Holy Land report. It's the it was found in the cellar of the house. It was the founding documents, everything you wanted to know about Islam. It lists CARE. It lists all the organizations. It lists all the funding for organizations. It lists their goals. And the U.S. has had it, and they ought to use that and declare every one of those organizations a terrorist organization. But they don't have the guts to do it. The leaders, you got a picture of George Bush after 9/11, and the guy in the picture right behind him over his right shoulder, is the leader of Islam in the United States. And he's standing there on the dais. I know there's no litmus test for people for religion, for people to run for office. So you can't say Muslims can't run. But going to Alan's point, when you take the oath of office and you pledge allegiance to the Constitution, a Muslim can't do that. And if they do,
because they're able to lie.
That's just what I was going to say. They'll do it because, So, and then you got to call a spade a spade. You say, well, you're a Muslim. You don't believe in that. Oh, yeah, I do. Well, and my son, a Muslim, he served in the military, so he ought to be able to get, well, I'm glad he served in the military. That's well and good, good for him. Maybe he helped the country, but there is no justification for America to allow people to come in it, whether it be illegal aliens or it be people that espouse beliefs that are contrary to the interests of the United States. They ought to boot them out. They ought to eject them. You cannot keep pure if you allow things just to pollute. And to say that, well, they're entitled to their opinion. Okay, they can have their opinion, but they can have their butt across the border. When you have people running for office, which happens, and there's over 100 of them elected, where they are cheering on, Antifa or these other groups, they ought to be rounded up, charged with treason, stripped of their office, fined, put in jail, or thrown out. Period. End of statement. Other than that, I don't have an opinion.
I have a feeling that when I ask Alan his opinion or his thoughts about what I just said, he's going to begin it with, I'm going to look at this a slightly different way. Alan, what do you got to say?
Well, I can look at it a slightly different way if you want me to.
Oh, but you won't.
Well, Dennis, great sharing. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
I'm not going to disagree with anything Dennis said. By the way, it began in 610.
Yeah, okay. I knew it was 600 something, but
yeah, I knew it was 6 something too. I knew it was before 700, but I didn't know by how much. Very good. Thank you, sir, for the research.
To Dennis's point, You have a creator that created everything. Yet the true essence of this creator is not brought to humanity until 610. Doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, they claim that they were there through Ishmael in the beginning, and that it was okay, but the problem with emphasis went in the wrong direction. Not on Ishmael, it went on Israel.
Mm-hmm. Then we
Well,
have
before Ishmael and Isaac and all of that, you've got a couple of 1,000 years before them. So
True.
even if you want to say that they kind of started then, it would start. God would reveal himself at the very beginning because he cares about them all. I'm sorry, Alan. Go ahead.
Well, he
Okay.
did. He did, but not that God, but the true God. But
Yeah.
I know what you mean. All right, go ahead, Alan.
Well, thank you. For me, and I won't define or name a creator. I just accept that there is one, and I'm part of the creation, and I owe back. But I don't see how being very connected to the creator, that this creator would want me to lie, to steal, to kill. That doesn't make sense to me. And you can lie, you can steal, and you can kill if you promote one specific view. Now, one of the kickers in Islam is that you have at least two different views on what is okay. And I guess that's why Iran and Iraq could go to war. You have the Sunnis and the Shias. And they don't see things quite eye to eye. So it's okay to do it.
And you got the Kurds in the corner with a third way of looking at it.
Okay. Anyway, given what nature is, which I see every day,
Mhm.
It can be the sky, the clouds, the sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, the animals, grass, oceans, everything. This is an act of great giving and beauty. I don't see a creator doing this and creating our life and then saying, okay, if you really got it right, you can kill people who don't agree with you. It just does not work for me at all. And if you want to believe it, go ahead and believe it. So don't act on it. Because this is not going to make humanity better. Another thing is that you guys have heard of no-go zones?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a longtime friend of mine, he used to teach police and military all over the country and all over the world. And one time, some years ago, he went to Paris to do this kind of combative education.
You go.
And this is when I first heard from him about no-go zones in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And the no-go zone, as he told me, is...
It's like 47 last time I looked, no-go zones in Paris. But anyway,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And they're known, and they've been mapped.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, if you go into... This is in Paris.
Right.
If you go into that zone, you have gone into an area that is no longer governed by the rules, laws of France. It's governed and ruled and enforced by the rules of Islam. And, you'd be hard pressed if you wanted police or fire or ambulance to come in because they might get attacked. This is in the the crown city of France.
Balkanization. They do it throughout all of society.
Which tells me these people are obviously not about assimilation. They don't want to assimilate. In fact, they want to do whatever they want to do, regardless of what land they're on. This is a wake-up call. We're being told this is not okay. Oh, for me,
Well, you know the visual flight rules of Islam, right?
tell me.
They aren't known by that, so you won't know really what I'm saying. But when you stand on the spire of a, I want to say temple. What is it? The
Synagogue?
well, they don't call them synagogues. What do they call
We're
them?
talking about a mosque.
A
A
mosque.
mosque, yeah.
Okay.
When you stand on the turret of the mosque, everything you can see in your eye, everything is now in effect owned and controlled by the mosque. So they build mosques, and it's like, putting a transmitter device out there to get your phone coverage further and further and further, deeper and deeper into society.
And once it belongs to law, it can never. It's forever. So that's the reason
right.
why they. Yeah.
That's right. So, they have these rules and stuff they believe in to where they think they're fighting for Allah's land. And, Allah just finished the turret on the mosque, last week. And the guy got up there and, marked it up. And all of a sudden, all the people that owned all that property and all the rest, in effect, they don't own a thing. And if you own something that Allah owns and you're squatters now on it, and look what's happening in America. How many people, when you go on vacation, you come back into your house and they're squatting? I mean, how many stories have you read about the difficulty the homeowner has of getting rid of the squatters?
Right.
And that's what Islam does in every country they go into. And as soon as they build that first mosque, it's like trying to build a wall across China. They build it, they build another one. If they could build one every 5 miles and they could see each other 5 miles away with their binoculars or whatever, they would own all the land in the whole country and they didn't pay for a dime. So this is what you're fighting. There is no justice. There is no individual rights. It's their way or they'll kill you.
Right. All right, Alan, did you have anything to finish your thought with?
Again, this for me, this discussion is not about promoting one religion over another. It's about living in harmony where, okay, Doug really likes the Raiders, And back in the day, I was a Charger fan. Okay, just because you don't agree doesn't mean you can't be in the same room at the same time. Have your beliefs, have your dreams, whatever. But you got to know that taking something that is not yours is not right. Telling somebody they have to be like you or you'll kill them is not right. It's just not. And this is not, for me, this is not the dreams, the wishes, the hopes of the Creator. We're to create, develop, improve, get along, leave each other alone. But not to lie, steal, or kill. Those are my thoughts.
All right, very good. All right. And I knew this conversation would create a lot of discussion, but and I'm half expecting one of the two platforms here to cancel the show over this discussion. We'll see.
Well, I hope they get my name spelled right.
Dennis, Dennis. There.
Yeah, and then maybe you and I can join the Southern Poverty Law Group list. I know you feel bad not being put on that list.
Yeah, man. What do I gotta do? It's like anyway, all right. Yeah, it's like a badge of honor, to be hated by
Yep.
those people. All right, we do have Warhamster with us. I'm so glad he's here with us because he
Good.
always brings a perspective that is very important, and he makes every show that I do when he joins better. So I appreciate you being here. I hope we're not taking away from something. I saw you talking off camera there a little bit.
Yeah, I got to help the wife here when we get done. But no, it's a pleasure coming on. And as always, you gentlemen made some really good arguments. I'm not going to address anything in order, but I've long not considered Islam to be a religion, but rather a political. It is basically a political mission. Islam means to submit. The Quran, which I read as a young lad, basically talks about how you conquer people. They either convert, become a subjugated slave, or you take their head off. That's not how real religion spreads. Someone who Doug actually knows, Jim Simpson's been writing about this for years, the Red Green Alliance. There is no difference between Islam and their goal for basically international.
And might I say someone that Dennis also knows, Jim Simpson.
Did not know that. Yeah,
I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah, well, I've watched his videos years ago, and he sounded the alarm, and I did the homework on it, and he's absolutely correct. We're seeing it right in front of us. I'm not going to say other religions are not guilty of somehow occasionally using force. We know what the colonial Spanish did, etc. But that's not their entire. The Quran is a playbook for how to subjugate people, conquered peoples, and now we're talking about Iran. And the Persian people is a very, very proud people, one of the oldest civilizations to mankind. They have a lot to be proud of. They were Zoroastrianisms, or whatever that is, their religion. They were conquered by force over centuries. That's how Iran became a Muslim country, which they always do by the sword. And if you look at what we call the Middle East today, I think it's 73% of current Islam occupied countries were not. And they were all conquered by the sword. So that is not exactly what I call a religion. I call it a political movement. That being said, you've got to understand Iran and what's really going on there. Doug talks about, we're trying to negotiate with the leaders, and they don't want to do that. Well, how do we know who the leaders are? We've done enough damage to their leadership structure. There's multiple different factions fighting for leadership. So there may be somebody at the negotiating table today, and somebody else is sending out drones, a couple miles away. They are not organized. The vast majority of the Persian people gave up their guns, or they were taken away 6 decades ago, or right around there, 1978. But there's a reason that was allowed to happen, and that's because they had oil. And post-World War I, we carved up the Middle East, or I should say Britain pretty much carved up the Middle East for oil interests. And you had the English and Iranian oil interests. They put, the Shah in power. A democratically elected guy named Mossadegh tried to nationalize Iranian oil so that the Iranian people could actually reap the benefits of their own natural resources. The United States CIA couped Mossadegh and put the Shah back in power for the next 25 years in 1953. That's why this whole Islamic movement was allowed to take shape. And if the Iranian people were armed, this conflict would have been over 4 months ago. We have to create an environment where the Iranian people can take back, the Persian people, I should say, can take back their own country. And there's still going to be some Islamic people there. And they're still going, but it's not going to be this ruling class of mullahs, of Shiite mullahs. And that's where we want to get to. If that's accomplished, then the whole thing was worthwhile. So we just freed an awful lot of people. And I know some people that came here to America from Persia, and I don't like using the name Iran, but Persians would love to have that happen. And no, they don't want a new Shah in place. They want a chance to have self-governance like everyone else on this planet does. The mullahs are dictatorial, authoritarian. They are part of this whole Islamic globalist movement. They're currently allied with their globalist communist partners because Each one of these two sides thinks they're going to end up on top once they get rid of the freedom-loving people like us. But it's got a chance not to escalate. And Doug made a really good point. The hyperinflation going on in Iran, they have no ability to trade besides a few overland routes coming through Pakistan, which is where they're getting their resupplies from right now. I have no idea why we haven't taken those out militarily. Not my decision. But they are very much isolated. They're surrounded by Sunni Muslims who don't necessarily like them at all, the mullahs. And their ability to project force has been limited. We just need this to come to an end quickly. And hopefully in such a way that the Persian people can actually have self-determination. And they can practice any religion they want. If they want to continue to pretend that, Islam is a religion, why no Muslims? They're wonderful people who feel that way. They say it's the religion of peace. I don't happen to agree because I've read the book. I don't think you can follow parts of it and then ignore the rest. But the bottom line, it is a playbook, and it always has been, for how to deal with conquered people. And it is there's no doubt in our minds that Muhammad wanted the whole world to submit under Islam. And I'm not okay with that.
One of the longtime advertisers for this program, when it was on AM/FM radio at KMET, Dean from All Star Collision, he came here from Iran, and he would say he's Persian, and he said to me one time that the Persian people hate the Arabs because they brought Islam to Persia.
They were conquered.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to have those conversations with him. All right, gentlemen, I've got time for probably one more topic. We got about half an hour left, and this one is actually because of a conversation I had with somebody that I actually respect. I am friends with here in where I live here in Southern Oregon, and I've had a few of these conversations. The Constitution, because we don't understand it, we've been fed so much junk. We sometimes don't understand the details. Matter of fact, I had a conversation with this gentleman today, and when he got upset about me using human nature, and he was very upset at me, and now he better understands what I meant by what I was saying. And I think we need to understand, as constitutionalists, as those who love liberty, as those who believe in God-given rights, that when it comes to the United States Constitution, the principles that are in that document, that the idea of state sovereignty, the idea of localism, the idea of limited government, distribution of power, all of that is necessary to secure natural rights. And the reason is because of human nature. And the federal government possesses no constitutional authority to impose something like the death penalty across the country for a reason. That isn't oversight. It's a deliberate design of our founding document. The Constitution establishes a federal government of limited enumerated powers, with all other authority reserved for the states through the 10th Amendment, or the 10th Amendment tells us that. This structure wasn't created by accident. They just go, oh, this sounds like, this was a long debate. And understand that, with the way this country developed, with these colonies that became states, and the states having a voice. When they were in the Constitutional Convention, and on Warhamster's channel once a week, we're going through the Madison's notes. And one of the things that we come across often is, well, it sounds like a good idea, but I don't know if the states would accept it. The states were a consideration, a serious consideration, when it came to this system. State sovereignty was the key because they knew that that was one of the components of standing against potential tyranny, and government's job remaining securing our natural rights and not becoming some other type of political monster. It was, and all of this structure that I'm talking about then was also thought through a careful consideration of human nature itself. It's the document's not antiquated because liberty and tyranny doesn't change. Collectivism versus individualism doesn't change. Localism is essential precisely because it creates laboratories within our republic where different approaches can be tested. When a state implements flawed policy, the damage is contained. When the federal government imposes some flawed policy nationwide, the consequences are catastrophic. It's far easier to correct bad policy on a state level than to reverse a federal mandate affecting 50 states simultaneously. And at a state, because it's more in tune with you, you have more control over it. The Constitution's genius lies in its recognition of human nature's darker aspects: the desire for power, the tendency toward greed, and the temptation to consolidate authority. The founding fathers understood that concentrating power into any entity, including us, that's the reason why they didn't want democracy, or be it federal, or be it the president or legislature, whatever, would create an irresistible target for those who would abuse it. This is why our system has enumerated powers and then a separation of powers, 3 branches who possess their own powers. Federalism, where you've got federal power, you have the state powers. Powers distributed between federal and state governments. So republicanism, where we elect representatives, and we have other components of a republic, many of which have been dismantled at this point, to protect us from direct democracy so that our natural rights are properly secured. This intricate power distribution wasn't designed for efficiency, but for protection. Protection from ourselves and our worst impulses. When we advocate for federal solutions to problems we find urgent, we're essentially saying, let's ignore all these safeguards because I'm confident my side will always be in control. There are foundational reasons for this structure, and a large part of that is human nature. Human nature includes not just admirable traits like leadership and courage, but also dangerous impulses like the desire for power and the tendency to believe that we know best for everyone else. And we all possess these same basic human attributes, which express them differently. The same assertiveness that can make someone an effective leader can, in different circumstances, make them a tyrant. The same passion for justice in somebody else could become zealotry. The Constitution doesn't assume the best of human nature. It was written because it plans for the worst. If something truly requires national uniformity, the Constitution provides a mechanism, the amendment process. And this deliberately difficult procedure requires supermajorities at both the federal and state levels, precisely because national standards should only be imposed when overwhelming consensus exists. The amendment process respects state sovereignty by requiring permission from the states through ratification. This ensures that changes to our fundamental governing document reflect broad agreement rather than temporary passions or the whims of a simple majority. In our constitutional system, citizens facing policies they dislike in their state, they have 3 legitimate options: stay and advocate, work to change the laws through the political process, or vote with your feet, move to a state whose policies better align with your views, or accept and endure. Recognize that in a diverse arena, not every state will reflect your preferences. What is not an option is to bypass the constitutional process because we're impatient for change or frustrated with our state's direction. To do so is to invite the very tyranny the Constitution was designed to prevent. The Constitution doesn't need updating. It needs to be applied as originally intended. The problems we face today often stem not from deficiencies in our founding document, but from our failure to operate within its framework. When we abandon constitutional principles because they seem antiquated or inefficient, we're not adapting to modern times. We're repeating the same mistakes that have plagued governments throughout history. And one of the examples I like to use is it's the recipe. If you follow the recipe, if you want the dish to taste right, if you substitute parsley instead of the cilantro that a recipe calls for, it's not going to taste right. That's what we've done. And then we sit here and say, oh, the Constitution is a problem. We're not following the recipe, not the original recipe. And the next time we're tempted to advocate for federal solutions to state problems, we need to remember why our system exists: to distribute power as broadly as possible, to make it difficult for any faction to dominate, to protect us from our own worst impulses. That's not antiquated thinking, for the basic foundations of liberty and tyranny have never changed. That's timeless wisdom about human nature and the proper role of government in a free society. This is in the wheelhouse of Warhamster. I can't wait to hear your response. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I didn't know you were going to throw it to me first. I find it interesting.
This topic, you didn't wait. This topic, you think I throw it to you first?
Yeah. I'm a big states' rights guy, as everybody knows, and I like to. One of my favorite trivia questions is, how often and where is the concept of independent states mentioned in the Declaration of Independence? And the answer is it's mentioned 3 times in the final paragraph. That's the only time it's mentioned. It says, and of the right to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from allegiance to the British Crown. Goes on, and that as free and independent states, that they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. That's 3 times in the final paragraph of one of the most powerful documents ever written. Jefferson made that a priority to point out that we are free and independent states. We are sovereign as states. When we got together in Philadelphia, we were already united under the Articles of Confederation. Granted, we realized we had to improve upon the Articles of Confederation to do a better job of maintaining order between the states. There just was not enough central control to settle disputes. And that was one of the authorities that was going to be granted, one of the powers that going to be granted to the new federal government, which didn't exist previously. But no way, shape, or form did any of these independent states, these independent sovereign states, think they're going to give up their sovereignty.
Right.
But
to mediate between them.
Yeah, because there's going to be a time and a place, and the best example is New York and New Jersey. We're having a tariff war between each other. New Jersey's getting screwed. They go, wait a minute, we can't trade. We're too small, and our farmers can't send their goods into New York, which is maybe a mile away, because of tariffs. That's just not working. You needed to have free trade among the independent states, which is the purpose of the Union in the first place, besides mutual defense. And the Constitution never gets ratified if the idea of each of the states wasn't going to maintain their individual sovereignty. Nobody would have ratified it. Not a single one of them. And the founders in Philadelphia knew that. They debated it. They discussed it almost every day. Look, my state's going to say no to this. The small states will say no. The big states will say no. You had to maintain independent sovereignty. That's called states' rights. And states' rights, it's embedded in the founding documents. It's embedded in the Constitution. And the nationalists, who gave themselves many names over the last 2 centuries, have been trying to whittle away at that for quite some time because they want central control. And one thing I will say about central government is it's never efficient unless it does one of 2 things: fights wars or collecting taxes. Everything else should be done locally. That's all I got for now.
All right, very good. Alan, what's your thoughts?
About what? Ha 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 ha.
About what we've talked about.
Oh, state sovereignty. Well, thank you all for what you said. I like to go back in history.
State sovereignty and also human nature and how that all plays into.
Yeah. But sticking with state sovereignty for a moment, when the people showed up for the Declaration of Independence, when they definitely showed up for the Constitution, they came as representatives from their state, colony, to a degree for the Declaration of Independence. To give you an idea of how absolutely state-oriented some of these places were, 4 states, and I'll call them states, they had a state constitution prior to July 4, 1776. New Hampshire, South Carolina, Virginia, New Jersey. How state-oriented are they? Absolutely.
Note
4
that
more states.
Real quick, Alan, note that New Hampshire was first. Thank you.
Well, of course. Do you know on what date? January 5th,
Yeah,
1776.
I've actually got a copy of the document right over there.
Oh, beautiful. Anyway, 4 more states had a state constitution before the end of 1776. These people were very, very state-oriented. And as Doug pointed out, there wasn't Articles of Confederation. They found out it just didn't work. They needed something more powerful. And the Constitution, for me, was created to create a federal government, not a national government. And this federal entity would work for the states and do the things that the states needed to be done with the rest of the outside world. Trade, war, peace, treaties, whatever. That's all they wanted. That's all they needed. The federal government had no business dealing with anything interior unless it was 2 or more states squabbling. That tells me that this country was founded by people representing very independent states. And these states, who were creating this new federal government, the federal government didn't create the states created the federal government. They wanted to make sure they could keep their hands on this potential monster they were creating. That's why you have the Senate. And the Senate worked the way it was supposed to until the ratification of the 17th Amendment. The states wanted a voice at the federal level. The people who helped write the Constitution, they were very bright, very knowledgeable, great educations, and they had already dealt with a really bad aspect of human nature. It's called Great Britain. It's called the Revolution. It's called getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, leading up to Lexington and Concord.
It's called mercantilism, Alan.
I'll call it a lot of things. It's calling that Britain decided we can't pay all the debt we acquired fighting the French and Indian War, so we're going to squeeze it out of the colonies. And of course, that began with the Stamp Act. That didn't last long, and there were other things. And then people in the colonies had no representation in Parliament. It goes on. The people who put the Constitution together knew all of this. They had lived it. And they actually wanted to do something better. And as we've discussed many times on the show, they did not create a democracy. Doug, how many times is democracy mentioned in the Constitution?
That would be a big fat 0.
Along with the Articles of Confederation.
And Alan, I don't see it in the Declaration of Independence either, even though it's not a legal document.
It's not.
Neglects it.
They wanted a republic. They did not want a democracy. For those who are interested, go research founders and what they said about democracy. They knew what it was, and it was the majority rules everybody else. And one of the quotes is, I don't have them up in front of me. One of the quotes is, it's 4 wolves and a sheep deciding what's for lunch. They didn't want it. And Doug could instantly tell you where in the Constitution, if they really were dreaming of a democracy, why were the states guaranteed a Republican form of government?
Article 4, Section 4. And
They
one of the
knew-
other quotes would be democracies when 51% could vote away the rights of the other 49%.
Thank you, Thomas Jefferson.
Mhm.
And that's the interesting thing. This document and the founders acknowledge that we, the people, have rights, and you cannot legislate away our rights. And I would say this in conclusion, if you encounter somebody who's running for office or who is in office, and they keep saying they want to save the democracy, number one, ask them what they're talking about, then ask them which one. There's at least 7 different types of democracy, and the United States of America is not one of them. We're a republic. Thank you, Doug.
Very good. With under 10 minutes to go, Dennis, you get to talk about the Constitution and human nature and why our system is the way it is with state sovereignty and all of that other good stuff that I went over.
Well, human nature, usually when that's used, it's a excuse for something that's negative, and well, just human nature. Now, I can think of some positive ways, that you can apply it, but the founders knew very well the relationship between power and how people acted, and human nature being what it is. When people get power, they usually wind up, to some degree, somehow, some way, planned, unplanned, they usually wind up abusing it in some fashion. And there's got to be a check, on them, and if the boss is abusive and the secretary's the victim, the check can't be the secretary, it's got to be something else, whether it be the HR department, whatever. But there's got to be a check somewhere. And, they went through the balance of powers, and, they divvied them up, the 3 of them. And as you have gone through in your Constitution class, you talk about the word is vested, all, and that's pretty inclusive. Of all legislative power is vested in the Congress, what's the definition of all, Mr. Clinton? So all's everything. So the president can't do it, the court can't do it, the court doesn't like it, the court can have an opinion and say, we don't like the way this law is written, or we can't apply it. That's what I think they ought to do. They ought to say, we're trying to apply the law, but you know what? It's rather confusing. So why don't you guys rewrite this thing and make sure that it's, better defined, better stated, clearer to the understanding of men, and we, the court, will apply it. But, the guy who likes authority, he'll say, it's kind of confusing. Well, I got an opening, I'll go ahead and give my interpretation. And when you start doing all these little things, it doesn't take too long. If all your employees, you're only stealing a few pennies a day before, you're bankrupt. Everybody's doing it just a little at a time. Nobody's committing grand theft. But the fact of the matter is, the business, is out of business. And our government is supposed to be a limited government, not limited, gradually growing every year after year, because after a while, limited turns into unlimited. And kind of like the tax code. When the IRS first started, you got to be making at least this much, and you're not going to pay anything. And if you do pay some, just 1 or 2%. If they tried to pass the first tax code with California tax rates, the guy would have got shot, hung, tarred and feathered. But that's the way it always is. It always starts this incrementalism. I think that's the word the war hamster used earlier. And human nature is kind of like incrementalism. Once you start allowing people to, vary and excuse it and then accept it, and then the next guy says, well, they went an inch, I'll go an inch and a half. And then, a year later, somebody's going 10 feet of the whack, and the founders restrained everything by it says by the change of the Constitution, that it will hold it back, but the Constitution, the country had to be strong enough, to be the lion when it needed to be, but at the same time, it should do no harm. And, I'm biased to a degree in business. It seems to me that most people that go into purchasing seem to kind of have a Napoleonic complex. I don't know if it's because they're short and they're trying to make up for being short by, being the emperor, and this guy isn't, the engineering manager, even though he could be. Height has got nothing to do with it. But they seem to get into purchasing because they know if they're in purchasing, people are going to call them and take them to lunch and schmooze them. So if they like getting flattered, fairly or unfairly, if they like being taken to lunch a lot, then, you need to be in purchasing, because the sales guys have to talk to the purchasing guys. And the sales guys are out and they'll take you golfing and they'll buy you meals and they'll do all this stuff, and it also gives that little guy the opportunity to tell the big guy no, So I've run into a couple of guys that kind of, fit this. Like I say, I'm kind of broad basing it. But people to me that go into politics have a tendency to be that way. I think a lot of people, when they start to go into politics, they want to be the man in charge, or the woman in charge. They want to be seen. They want to be called the representative or your honor or whatever the thing is. And they want to be a mover and shaker. But some of these guys, like Huckle and some of these governors, they wanted to be governors. And then when it hit the fan and there's a state emergency, like the mayor down here in LA with Bass, they're nowhere to be seen. When it gets hot, they don't want to be in that kitchen. And, they ought to just get out of government. So, when the founders did this, they understood the nature of men. And they, like you say, they kind of assumed, we need to put some stuff in here. So they put in 2/3, they put in 3/4, they divided up all the powers. And then once it was done, between the 17th Amendment and between all the other things that they've done, they started, liquidating that to where the states, that Senate, which the senators are appointed by the states to look out for the states. And if they weren't looking out for the states, they could be replaced. And it wasn't an election. They couldn't just raise a lot of money and throw their BS around. The legislators said, you're gone, And if the legislature went from liberal to conservative or conservative to liberal, and if the liberal guys had a liberal senator, the conservatives are going to come in and they're going to change the senator if they can, But I think a lot of those senators were probably pretty straightforward and did a good job of trying to represent their state per the legislation that appointed them. And if the legislation got more conservative, then they would get more conservative. They would say, hey, I'm here
party. It wasn't about party as much as it was about the state. I tell people that the 17th Amendment introduced ideology into the U.S. Senate, and I really do believe that.
Well, but like you say, you've got a list, and there's like 7 things that the Senate does, whether it be confirmations or whatever it is, that 5 of those 7, now they're just like, the House of Representatives, because they're properly elected, And so they don't answer to the states anymore. They just answer to the people. They can lie or do whatever they want to do to win the election. Then they're home free for 6 years, and they can appeal to the basis sources of human nature to get elected. But the people in the administration in California has got a terrible legislature, but those that are there, supposedly are better qualified to pick the person to represent the state. And the founders did that because they were trying to make sure the states had their sovereign voice through their representative, not a popular elected guy, so that they can control it. And, so both between the states and, the human nature thing, like I said, the tendency is that, people will drift. If they start getting away with something, then they start regrettably doing it more, and they get better at covering it up. And, it's like an embezzler, but I'm not saying everybody with the human nature are thieves. I mean, I have my human nature, but, I need to, call myself out and, look in the mirror and make sure I'm still seeing my reflection.
Yeah, self-examine. Yeah, that's something that people have trouble doing.
Yeah. So that's about it. I'll hang it up.
We're out of time, but unlike radio, the engineer isn't going to suddenly cut us off. I can go a little over here. So now, Dennis, thank you for being on the program as always. Dennis doesn't have a website or anything, but typically, if I ask him to plug something, he usually says something along the lines of my website or Trevor Loudon. So pick something that you'd like to plug for the audience.
Okay. I'm trying to recall the name of the deal. It's Judge Saul and his charity, protecting the persecuted, or whatever the name of it is. They're having their big grand, big annual fundraiser next week. Okay. And the work that they do.
Well, get me the information. I'll put in the information, the summary line here on this.
All right.
Judge Saul, for those of you who might not know, is a director of Enemies Within, Trevor Loudon's film.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
That's it for me.
All right. Very good. Alan, plug yourself, sir.
FedEd, FEDED.US for basic monetary system education. And on Sundays on Patriot Soapbox, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time for the Republic.
Thank you so much for joining me today, as always, every week. And Warhamster, you definitely have some places to plug. Go ahead, sir. Need to unmute, sir. Go ahead and unmute yourself, sir. There we go.
All right, now I've unmuted. Sorry about that, people. I'm just not used to being zipped. I'm doing 2 or 3 videos per week. My regular Wednesday show with Doug is we're going through the Madison's notes from the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. That's been a lot of fun. We got weeks and weeks and weeks of that to go. But if you want to understand original intent, that's the place to do it. You can find that on my Rumble channel, rumble.com/warhamster. You can also find it on YouTube, and that channel is now growing. And just go to YouTube and look for war_hamster 2560. Apparently there's other people using the Warhamster name on YouTube. I'm harder to find than I should be. And you can always find me on Twitter/X at war_hamster1776, where I'm pretty active.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir. And I am Douglas V. Gibbs. United We Stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America. And in fact, let's move myself here. There we go. United We Stand, DouglasVGibbs.com. I write pretty much every day. DouglasVGibbs.com. Check out the blog, Political Pistachio. And I do have a new book out, Constitutional Presidency of Donald J. Trump. And I now have a books section at the website. So if you go there to far right, hit the books link, and they'll all come up. And we have all kinds of shows during the week. And I am excited about the fact that we are slowly growing. We are no longer on AM/FM radio. There's a couple shows that I'm no longer doing, but right here at rumble.com/Douglas V. Gibbs and youtube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs. I do have Brighteon and BitChute as well. They're going to kind of be more backups, but my primary locations are Rumble and YouTube, Douglas V. Gibbs, douglasvgibbs.com. And as always, I appreciate you. I can't wait to see you next time. Thanks for joining us. We're out of here. Bye-bye now.